Welcome to the Hardwood Hustle powered by PGC Basketball. We believe in the value of a coach. We're here to educate, empower, and encourage you to lead like never before. Coaching changes happen every season. This week, TJ and Sam discuss how you should go about evaluating where you're at and whether or not a coaching move is right for you. Let's get started.
Hey, welcome to the Hardwood Hustle. Sam and I got a fun topic today for you. You know, a lot of times we spend thinking about what are we going to do next? Do we like our job? Do we not like our job? How can we make our job better? I think every coach goes through this at the end of the season. You know, it doesn't matter what age you're coaching. Am I going to do it again? Am I going to retire? Am I going to look for a new job? Am I going to look for a new position? What do I do when I go after these jobs? How do I interview? We've done an episode similar to this before, but not really a deep dive into, at the end of the season, how do you evaluate where you are? We've talked about your team. How do you evaluate your team? But actually, where are you in the process and what decisions do you need to make? But before we do that, I want to give a reminder. You know, it's February and it's Black History Month, and we did a really powerful episode number 383, Breaking the Color Line, the untold story of Willie Cooper. If you have not listened to that, I really highly recommend that you go back to that episode. You know, it's a lot of listening to a story from a gentleman who had a front row seat or firsthand experience with this. And the story of Willie Cooper and the breaking of the color line is a really, really interesting one. And it happened in North Carolina. I was just recently reading some of the things that Dean Smith did back in the day. Just an interesting fact before we move forward. Back in the 1940s, now this is, a while back, in the 1940s, Coach Smith actually convinced his dad, Alfred Smith, who was a high school coach in Toledo, to integrate the two teams they had. They had a black team and a white team. Really interesting story, and Dean Smith played a big role in that. He comes up in this one, Breaking the Color Line, the untold story of Willie Cooper, episode 383. So, coaches, I really encourage you to go listen to a powerful episode. Sam, let's jump into today's episode. We're talking about, at the end of the season, it is really hard. We've actually had this talk before about hoop dirt, which is I know for college coaches, it's a really highly followed, Twitter handle where it's like every job that comes open, the story, why, what they're looking for. I mean, coaches are glued to this in college. And I think it's true at really any level of basketball. It's a really unique profession that we're in. At the end of the season, you've given so much, and it's hard not to just pause and say, gosh, can I do this again? Do I need to do it in a different environment? Is the grass greener? Do I need a different position? How can I make this job better? But there is a lot of self-evaluation that goes in at the end of a season. It's not like your regular, I'd say 9 to 5, where you kind of do it every week, every day, and then you just kind of keep going, and there's no beginning and no end to it. And the drain of putting your heart and soul into a season of basketball just makes you feel different at the end. So let's first talk, before we move forward, to what's next and what coaches can do or what they should do. Talk about this self-evaluation. I know that you just got done coaching 100 games. You were coaching 3 different middle school teams. That grind. You've done it at college. You've done it in the middle school. You've done it in your AAU season. You've done it almost in everyone. And there is this time where you just need to take a deep breath and evaluate.
Yeah, TJ, I was actually talking with Mono about this a few days ago. And when you get to the end of the season, and you're in it right now, but you're running on adrenaline so much, you're so locked in, you're so hyper focused, you're focused on the next practice, the next game, the next conversation with that player you need to have, and you're just running, high energy, high fumes, maybe not getting much sleep. And I was getting to a place recently where I felt like I couldn't make good decisions. On top of coaching, I'm running a business. We have our PGC coaching, so almost doing 2 full-time jobs and then coaching full-time 3 teams. And my world was really spinning, and I didn't feel like I was able to even be in the right state of mind to make good decisions. I actually think it affected me coaching. I don't think I was at my best, and I'm hyper aware of all these things. And so I'm saying that to say, it's been about a week now since the season's been over. I feel like the clouds are starting to clear themselves, where I can think more clearly. I can be a better husband, a better father, a better leader, a better business operator, all those things. But I'm saying that as an opening thought, like coaches that are listening, leaders that are listening, sometimes you need to let the smoke clear after the season and give yourself a couple of weeks. Everybody, processes differently, whether it's a few days, a week, 2 weeks, three. I don't know what that time is for everybody, but for me, I know I need to clear my mind so I can think more clearly and make better decisions. That's my opening thought for this.
Yeah, and I know that feeling, after 22 years of college coaching, like every year I come to that same place at the end of the season where, it's just, well, first of all, I think everybody always wonders, is the grass greener? You know what I mean? Because everybody's dealing with problems in their program, whether it's you don't have the right funding or you don't have the right support or you've got difficult parents or you've got a difficult administration or you got, like, everybody's got their own world problems going on at their particular job. And so I think one of the first things coaches think about is the grass greener? And the answer to that is, not always, and sometimes it is. There's no, situation that's perfect, to be honest with you. I don't know a coach that is not somewhat frustrated by their situation, whatever that frustration might be. It's a different frustration, but every coach has some level of frustration with their job. One of the things that I'm caught off guard by is in the last couple of years, we've talked about this a little bit, but I was thinking about this when we were on a road trip, and it was multiple college coaches there, and we were all talking, and almost every single one of them is like, why do we do this? Like, oh my gosh, like how stressful is this? How intense is this? How is it never good enough? There's always somebody unhappy with you, whether it's players and playing time, whether it's parents, whether it's always. And the constant thing that I continue to hear is like, why do I do this? And I do think that's a whole nother conversation, just regrounding and remembering why you do. There are a lot of great reasons why you do what you do, but it'd be stupid of us not to think that there aren't coaches out there. And the majority of coaches probably thinking, gosh, why do I do this? There's so much involved in it. And, I know this time of season, we're getting down towards the end, and man, I've just lost so much contact with so many things, like just like paying the bills, like just like whatever, all right, hun, just take care of that. I mean, there's just so many little things that aren't getting done at the home and different aspects of my life, not even to mention some health things. Your eating starts to slip at some point because you're on the road. There's so many things that just make you reevaluate why you're doing what you're doing. And so let's talk about that for a second, just the evaluation process. When a coach is it time to move on? Is it time to look for another job? Is it time to improve the job you're at? Like, how do you just begin to evaluate that stuff at the end of a season?
Well, I do want to hit on something. And we'll get into this, so I won't go back to it too much. But you said, it's like you're talking about those coaches you're having a conversation with, and they're like, "Why do we do this?" Like, you do need to remind yourself. I was talking with a high school coaching friend just last week who was telling me, he's like, "Sam, look, I will not let the players or the parents that I coach and that are in my program, they are not going to take my joy away from the game. Like, I'm going to remain joyful in coaching." And this is like a guy who's been coaching 20 plus years, and he's tough on kids, and he runs, high accountability program. But he's like, I'm going to enjoy it. And I do think that I heard him say it, and I'm very mindful of that. But I remember thinking, you know what? That was a great, I'm really glad he said that, because I think this year at times I forgot to be joyful in my coaching, and I was so focused on the next thing or, the next game. And so I just say that as a reminder, like, remember, enjoy this thing. Like, you should have fun coaching. You're coaching basketball. You're impacting kids' lives in a positive way, and it should be joyful. Is it going to be challenging? Yeah. Is it going to be some hard times? Yeah. But it can be joyful too. So as far as the, evaluating, is that what we're talking about right now? We're talking about how to evaluate end of the season, current job, next job. And I think, you've been at Emmanuel for 20 years, and that's a long time, or close to 20 years. And some coaches, they need a reset. I had a coach tell me he's been at a place like 5 or 6 years. He's like, I feel like my voice is not, it's getting drowned out. They're stopped listening to me. He's like ready to go to the next job. So I know a lot of coaches, they go 5 or 6 years and boom, they're on the next one. Larry Brown was that way in the NBA. you never see Larry Brown at a job longer. Now he grinds on guys and coaches them hard. So sometimes coaches that coach that way, they do need to go maybe start fresh somewhere. But yeah, that's my first thing is like just it is hard to know whether to stay at a place or to go look elsewhere. I think that's a really hard decision.
Yeah. And you and I don't think we would share all these conversations, but we have conversations with coaches all the time. And I think it's more common in the last few years for coaches to be evaluating not just is this the right job or the wrong job, the evaluation of should I be coaching? I think a lot of people have been worn out by different things and different things at different levels, right? I mean, I think that I think at the college level, the NIL deals and the transfer portal and just like all of that, just constant cycling of things. I think that is worn on coaches. I think that there's really good coaches that we've talked about, like, Jay Wright and some other people that have stepped away probably earlier than we thought they would step away. But we've also know a lot of those coaches there's rumblings of that. Like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. You and I are recently having a conversation with a really good Power 5 college coach too. And you could sense and feel the frustration of just like, oh my gosh, dealing with this day in and day out. But I also think at other levels, there's other frustrations, whether it's parents. I mean, there's a lot of transferring going on in high school, administration, pressure to win, even though it's high school basketball. Like, you think somebody that's leading well and maximizing their program's potential would be enough, but sometimes it's not enough anymore. And, I think that just trickles down, and at every level, there is some frustration with coaching. So I think the first question is, gosh, is it worth it? And my answer almost every time is if you're in it for the right reasons, it's worth it. And we need you, like we need you in there coaching if you're in it for the right reasons. And yes, it is worth it, even though there's a lot of headaches that go with it. But that's for each coach to, think. And then the second one is, well, yeah, I really still want to do it, but do I still want to do it here at this particular place? And then I think you have to really evaluate. I would recommend just putting down on a piece of paper, like what I really like about this job and what don't I like about this job, and which of those things will be different at a different place versus, can I control it here? Because there's a lot of things that we can do, I think, to make our job better in the place that we're at. That great book, Make the Big Time Where You Are, really impacted me a lot. And listening to that coach talk about, I think it was a Division III football coach, been a while since I read it. But just talking about like wherever you're at. And I truly believe that it doesn't matter if you're coaching middle school basketball, travel basketball, college basketball, high school, but it doesn't matter. Like you have a really important job because you're impacting those 12 or 15 players, or maybe even more if you run the whole program. What you do is really important. And can I do things better here so that I like my job better? I think it's the first thing people should ask. I think a lot of times we just think it's going to be fixed by changing. And I have alluded to this before, like, just changing wives or husbands doesn't make everything better. A lot of times we think it will. Just by having more money doesn't make everything better. A lot of times these are inside jobs. If you can't have peace within and you can't find ways to enhance what you're doing and protect your joy, like you talked about a second ago, the grass is not always greener.
Yeah, and I think it's always worth it. That I think where coaches get mixed up is what you're talking to. It's always worth it. It's worth it to fight for it. It's worth it to work through some challenges and some challenging, situations or parents or players. So it's always worth it. It's then just redirecting your energy. If all your energy goes into a negative place or your attention goes there, then your energy flows with it. And so it's redirecting your own energy. So like you're going to have challenging players. You're going to have challenging administration to an extent. And so then you have to decide, okay, how do I shut out the outside noise so that I can be joyful, so that I can enjoy this thing and have a lot of fun? I do think, like the conversation we had that you alluded to is now when you coach, there is a lot more outside influence. So that player you coach not only has parents in their ear, they have a trainer, at the higher levels, you even have this at the D2 level. You got people that are agents who might be, trying to pull your best players. You got Division I coaches recruiting, your D2 all conference or all Americans. Like there's a lot more clutter. There's a lot more noise coming into the players, where before a coach was the most powerful voice in a player's ear. And now you as a coach are having to fight for just ear space and for attention of the players. So I think that's where TJ coaches get lost. I think that's where they get frustrated, and it's always worth it. It's always worth it. It's just a matter of shutting out the noise or putting your negative energy, trying to redirect it and get your why back centered and more grounded. And so I think that's important. I'll stop there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for sure. And I would encourage coaches to take, a day or 2 days or a weekend of just like solitude, of go fishing, go play some golf, go do whatever it is that you like to do. Spend some time doing that and just thinking and reflecting. I don't think we do this enough, just reflecting on everything over the course of the last year or the last season. And I'm not suggesting going to a dark room for 4 days like Aaron Rodgers, but just taking a little bit of time to evaluate. One of the things that often happens to me when I take that time and evaluate, things come to me on what I would do better next year. What would I do to enhance our program? Even right now at the end of the season, I'm trying to take notes on things I would do, enhancing the game day experience for my players, just little things that would make my situation more fun, make my situation better. And I think every coach can think of those things. And honestly, if you come to a place of like, you can't even think about improving your job, then maybe it is time for another job. You know what I mean? If you just can't even say, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do to make this better. And a lot of times it is an inside job. You know what I mean? I don't think external things are going to fix everything about your job. A lot of times it's an internal approach to how you feel about showing up every day to work, how you feel about showing up every day to make an impact and to coach your team. If you can't move past that and you're in such a place where it's like there's nothing that will make this better, maybe that's time. And let's talk about that for a second. So let's just say that it is time, and you want to look, and maybe it's not always a bad thing. Not every coach leaves because their situation is bad. Sometimes it's time for a different situation. Sometimes you want to move up to maybe a slightly better job. Sometimes it could be the area for your family. There's a lot of reasons people look for different jobs, and it's not always because my job is bad. Well, let's just say that you've decided, gosh, I need to start looking. I need to start thinking about, another job. What are some things that you think are really important in looking for? So if it goes past enhancing what's in your program, what are some things you're looking for in the next job, the next position that you think actually might enhance what you're currently doing?
Well, I think you're looking at, if I'm tracking your question the right way, I think you're looking at like administrative support. You're looking at, it depends on the age and stage. Sure, we're talking high school, college, but are the people around you in the leadership positions, are they supportive of your style, of your coaching approach, of your leadership? I think about Greg Popovich, TJ. Man, I really admire that dude who's won 5 championships. And he's gone through a 5-year stretch of a lot of losing, and you hear somebody like Doc Rivers say, well, I'm not interested in a rebuild. Like he left Boston. He wasn't interested in a rebuild at that stage in his career. And I've heard of high school coaches who won a lot and they're like, well, I'm not interested in a rebuild. I want to win right now. So my point is, why did Popovich stay with the Spurs? Well, probably because he's aligned with the owner, aligned with the GM. You as a college coach, there's probably there are situations right now, TJ, you could go to and get paid, twice what you get paid for at Emmanuel, that have better facilities, maybe more fertile recruiting, maybe a better campus, but it might not afford you the same alignment with leadership, and you're going to be having headaches and banging your head against the wall every day. So I think about the administration around you, at the high school level. Here's another big one, TJ, like, if you're a basketball coach, a boys basketball coach, and you're at a high school where the football coach, and you got to share players, but that football coach isn't a team player and is going to be kind of backstabbing or going underneath you and trying to get kids to quit other sports to be all football, or they want to hound their time in the off season. Like, you have to look at those things. So I'm saying what I'm putting under this umbrella is the leadership around you. It matters a lot.
Yeah, I was talking to a coach in our conference, an assistant coach, and they had listened to the Hardwood Hustle, and they said, "Hey, have you ever talked about the interview process? Like, what are some things you need to do in the interview process?" And like before we get there, I think you're hitting on a lot of good things. I think before you actually go looking for something else, I think you need to really pinpoint what are the things that I value the most that I'm looking for. And I think this is the same thing in recruiting, like coaches trying to help their kids get recruited. I made this mistake when I went to college, but I really didn't know what I was looking for. And I think a lot of coaches sometimes don't know what they're looking for. And Doc Rivers and Popovich, like you alluded to, I don't think either one of them is wrong, right? I think it is important. Like Popovich is aligned with the leadership there. He likes what he's doing. He's happy to be in San Antonio. But I don't think there's anything wrong with Doc Rivers saying, "Gosh, I've coached a long time. Like, I'm not up for the rebuild right now." Yeah, that's fair. Like, he knows himself. And I think that's what coaches need to do too, is when they're looking for a place, same as recruits, as I was talking about a second ago, like, would I be happy at this place if everything didn't go my way in my particular sport? Are these the kind of people I want to be around? Is this the right community? Is this the leadership that I align with? All of the different things. Can I get along with the other coaches at the school? Do we have a like-minded mission? All of those things are crazy important in discovering what is the right place for you. And I think sometimes people get so anxious to find the next thing, they make a bad step. Just because the next thing is not necessarily the best thing. I think you need to go into it kind of like going into marriage. Like, what do I stand for? What do I want my spouse to stand for? What are the things that are most important to me, so that you don't get sidetracked by the things that are least important? So I think really knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you align with before you actually just go after any and everything is a really important step as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, knowing who you are. Like, I've had coaches who took like a job in the country, and then they realize, they're like, you know what? I don't think that's who I am. I'm better coaching, in the city or inner city kid, and that's who they relate to better. And so I think you bring up a good point. Yeah, it's knowing who you are is really important. Sometimes we want to think we want to be something, but knowing who we are is really important. And so, if it's all right, let's talk about the interview process. So when you go into the interview process and you are looking for something else, and you just came out of a situation, this time of year, I get a lot of calls. I took like 4 phone calls, last Friday, from coaches who are looking to change jobs, and were asking me about a couple of jobs. And it's like, it's interesting to have each of those conversations, because they all ask different questions because of where their focus is and what matters most to them in the next job. What are the questions you're going to ask in the interview process? Because it's not just you getting interviewed. You better be interviewing the people that are interviewing you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Sam, because and that goes back to the previous point of just like knowing who you are and what you're looking for. I mean, sometimes the best thing you can do for a job is say no, and because it's not right for you. So I think one of the things that I think is really important in going to the interview process, the first thing is the first one you alluded to, is just like having your questions like answered. I say the same thing in recruiting. It's really interesting. I think we lose players sometimes because we don't tell them they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Like I really want it to be a match. On the flip side of that, we don't lose a lot of players because we're very upfront about what they're getting into, and we try our best to make sure that we're aligned. Like, we're a good fit for you. Like, the last thing I want is a great player who our school is a bad fit for them to come to our place, even though they're a good player. Like, I want good fits. I want people that want to be here. And I think that's important. Same thing in the job process. When you're looking, like, are you a good fit? And you need to know the questions that you would ask them to find out the answers to your questions. Because what if you go in and you just want a job so bad because of the pay or whatever it might be, but you have 3 things that are essential to you and you really value these in a school, and you ask them those 3 questions and their answers don't align with anything that you believe or anything that you think, then you're just going to take a job for money. That's a problem. But I would tell coaches, when you go into the interview process, be ready to answer your questions honestly. You don't want them to hire you because you said the right thing. You want them to hire you because you align with them, and vice versa. You want to know whether you want that job because you align with them. So I think having the right questions to ask them is really, really important.
Yeah, and also I've been in those situations either as being interviewed or interviewing someone else, TJ, where they have their talking points. It's like a politician who gets on stage during debate and the moderator asks a question. The politician never answers a question. They just share their talking points. I see that happen a lot with coaches too. It's like, I just want to get across my talking points, but they don't ever answer the question. And so then you realize, okay, they're just going after the job. And so I do think it's important that you do ask the right questions. It's why, quite frankly, I think it's why a lot of marriages fail. You get into a marriage and then you're like, oh, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that's how you felt about this. Why? Because you never talked about it. And like, to your point, you said something a minute ago. I'll make sure the listeners heard that. You said you don't lose a lot of players. You mean after players come to you, your transfer rate in 2023, 22 is like really good in terms of players. Not a lot of players leave you because you're saying you've been so upfront with them. There's no surprises once they get there. And I think people get a lot of surprises after the fact. And the reason is they don't ask the questions. They don't have the tough conversations. They don't ask the tough questions. I think that's so critical, is put it all on the table and let's see if we're a fit. And hey, sometimes you may be a little bit off in the interview, but you can work through it. Like, that can be true too. It doesn't mean just because we're not aligned right now that we can't bend a little bit on both ways.
Yeah, and I don't claim to be an expert in the interview process, and I haven't shared this often, but I've interviewed for 3 or 4 jobs, and in those cases, I actually feel like I did well in the interview and was offered the job and said no, just because it wasn't the right fit for me. It wasn't the right place, right time, whatever it might be. But I felt really comfortable in those interviews. You and I have interviewed a lot of people for coaching jobs, for PGC. We've interviewed a lot of people, so we know what a good interviewer feels like. For me, I think the best interviews have a real conversation feel to them, where you are talking with the people interviewing you and not just ready, almost like a good politician, like you said, that I have these answers in my mind right away, and then they're going to ask a question, I'm going to answer, and it's over. I think the best interviews turn into conversations. And I think anytime you can get into an interview and turn it into a conversation, even with just giving your answer, good follow-up questions back to them, asking them their thoughts, I think conversations make for the best interviews. And so I think the first thing you should be thinking about is, how do I turn this into a conversation? And honestly, I think one of the easiest ways to do that is to be confident in what you are looking for and who you are. Because if you go in and your only goal in an interview is to win, which a lot of coaches are wired to do, I think there's a good chance you might lose. If you go in there with a conversation saying, if this conversation goes well, the way I'd like it to go and the way they'd like it to go, I'd be a good candidate for them. And if it doesn't go the way I'd like it to go or they'd like it to go, we were never meant to be anyway. And I think just having peace in yourself and knowing that at the end of the day, I'm going to be where I need to be. And I'm going to put my best foot forward to show them who I am. And I'm going to ask the questions to figure out who they are. And I'm going to be comfortable with whichever way this goes will help you to be a better conversationalist in that interview process.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, turn the interview into a conversation. I think that is a great point. I think about, there's a business leader who I admire and respect a lot, TJ, and he, during their interview process, before he hires somebody, so they go through the interview process, and then he takes this person out on a dinner, and they invite the spouse. If there's a spouse, they want the spouse to come, and then this owner of this company brings his spouse. And, a spouse, like, for you, Aaron, for me, Sarah, like their read on people matters a lot, because they're going to pick up things that even you or I might miss. And he's like, and during a dinner, if I see crazy with the spouse, when I hire that person, I'm hiring crazy spouse too. And he's like, that's the last straw. So if they pass that test, we do hire. But there's been times where they check every box, they killed the interview, but we get into a dinner conversation and you're just having a conversation and some things start getting said and you're like, whoa. And then you get in the car ride home with your spouse and you're like, did you hear it? Did you pick up on that vibe? And then they end up not hiring them. I think so I'm just building on your point, which is, turn it into a conversation so you can really just find out who people are. And I think, there's another saying, like, be slow to hire and quick to fire. Like, go through a long process. Just like when you're recruiting kids, sometimes things happen quick in the recruiting process, but if you're going to be diligent, like, it's going to take a while. It should take a while.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up with a couple of thoughts here. A couple of things that just stick out to me here is take time at the end of the season. You went through a lot. I mean, it was emotional. You know what I mean? You were invested. You gave your heart and soul to this. Take a little bit of time. The second thing that I think about is really dive deep into the things that you are thinking about, the things that bothered you or the things that you think are going to be better on the other side of the fence, and really take some time to think through those things, because, I often think that we are at our best when we are comfortable knowing that we're right where we need to be. Now, that doesn't mean it might need to change in a week or 2 weeks or a year or 5 years or 20 years. Doesn't mean it doesn't need to change. But I also don't think it's an accident that you're right where you're at, gaining the learnings, going through the process. And oftentimes as a coach, as a leader, as a spouse, as anybody in any situation, we're not where our feet are. And therefore, we're not the best version of ourselves. And so don't forget to also just be present in where you're at and what you're doing. And ask yourself, was I completely present this season? Was my mind somewhere else? Was I letting other people steal my joy? Were they affecting my experience? Evaluate that as well. And then I think when you come to a place of maybe it's worth looking, am I looking for the right reasons? What exactly am I looking for? Why am I looking? I think those are all really important things. And then if you go even further down the road and you're like, gosh, maybe it's time for something different, and you get to that place of an interview process and looking for something else, like, not just is it right for me? Is it right for my family? Is this the right fit for our community? Is this the right fit for the administration there? Me for them, them for me? I think there's just a lot of those questions. And think of it as a journey. Like, I'm on a journey to do the right thing at the right place. And I'm not looking for the wrong answer, because I think so many times in society these days, like, we just think the next is going to be better. We think it's going to be the best situation is just right around the corner. We think that the new job, and that is not always the case. So be present, be available, be consistent in what you're doing, be honest with yourself, and just take time to make sure that's the next right step for you in your coaching career, and whether that's returning or whether that's moving on to the next place. So we go on for a long time about this, Sam, and I know coaches love talking about it this time of year. But, as we want to just encourage you, what you do is really important. You make a big difference. And it doesn't matter if it's down there, across the street, around the block, or a state away. It doesn't matter where you're doing it, what age, like, what you do is really important. And if you're in it for the right reasons, so people are taking and stealing your joy, steal it back. Like Sam talked about earlier, steal it back, take your joy back. And, best of luck, coaches, in deciding what is the next right thing in the next right place. But I know wherever you're going to be, you're going to have a team. And what you do is crazy valuable. So thanks for what you do on a daily basis, coaches. Hey, he is Sam. I am TJ. We are the Hardwood Hustle.
Thanks again for tuning into this episode of the Hardwood Hustle, where we believe in the value of a coach. Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Hardwood_Hustle to stay up to date on the latest episodes and share your thoughts with our coaching community. From the Hardwood Hustle team, thanks again. We can't wait to be with you again next week.